Mercury Theater on the air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects, vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the Great Disillusionment. Near the end of October, business was better. The war scare was over.
So we've got here the setup, the exposition to what Wells intends to do. Now, people were listening to a ventriloquist or to Jack Benny or to George Burns, two comedians. They didn't know. They missed this. Orson Welles setting this up. So you can imagine their surprise a few minutes later. Let's keep listening.
More men were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crosley service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
This is where the play starts.
For the next 24 hours, not much change in temperature. A slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is reported over Nova Scotia, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over the northeastern states, bringing a forecast of rain accompanied by winds of light gale force. Maximum temperature 66, minimum 48. This weather report comes to you from the Government Weather Bureau. We take you now to the Meridian Room in the Hotel Park Plaza in downtown New York, where you will be entertained by the music of Raymond Raquello and his orchestra.
And that was nothing out of the ordinary. That would have been a very average, normal nightly news broadcast that nobody would have thought anything about had they tuned in late. Raymond Raquello, I think, if I remember correctly, Wells made that up, but the Meridian Room in the Hotel Park Plaza was definitely a thing that existed, and I believe still exists. Orchestras played there. This is how news broadcasts worked. So you hear a Spanish tango that will fade out to another announcement in a moment here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza Hotel in New York City, we bring you the music of Raymond Raquello and his orchestra. With a touch of the Spanish, Raymond Raquello leads off with La Comparsita.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity.
Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York.
So here's where it starts. They'll punctuate the music with announcements that keep getting more desperate. So this Professor Farrell, I doubt such a person existed, but how was somebody in New York or California to know that? Of this observatory, Mount Jennings Observatory in Chicago, Illinois, said that there was something funny going on with Mars. So it was like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun. There was gas, a gas explosion. So later we'll find out this is probably when the ship took off. So nothing wrong here, nothing to see. All is well. Now back to Ramon Raquello.
New York.
And now a tune that never loses favor, the ever-popular Stardust, Raymond Raquello and his orchestra.
Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we have arranged an interview with the noted astronomer, Professor Pearson, who will give us his views on this event. In a few moments, we will take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, New Jersey. We return you until then to the music of Ramon Raquello and his orchestra.
So, first off, Professor Pearson is a member of Orson's theater troupe, as are all of these people. But this was how, the government got news across. This was how the government would let Americans back then know something was happening. They would send a wire, a bulletin, something, a messenger riding on a horse to a radio station, to the radio stations with an announcement that they wanted sent out. So this, again, there's nothing abnormal happening except what's going on Mars.
We are ready now to take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Richard Pearson, famous astronomer. We take you now to Princeton, New Jersey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton. I'm standing in a large semicircular room, pitch black except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, I can see a sprinkling of stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over the intricate mechanism of the huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the vibration of the clockwork. Professor Pearson stands directly above me on a small platform, peering through the giant lens. I'll ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides the ceaseless watch of the heavens, Professor Pearson may be interrupted by telephone or other communications. During this period, he is in constant touch with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
Any time, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea. Transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because Mars happens to be at the point nearest the Earth, in opposition, as we call it.
In your...
So how is the first part of the War of the Worlds written to make the audience think it is a real radio broadcast? Well, we've gone over this, I've explained this, but it certainly doesn't hurt to hit it again. They've announced it as such after after the announcer says that this is a program, an hour-long program that's going to be on the air by Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater Company, and the announcer throws it over to Orson Welles, who does the setup. It goes right to a weather report, which would not be in any way uncommon, absolutely not, at the time. And they play typical music that somebody would just sitting at home. You know, I'm sitting at my desk here. If this was 1938, I might have a radio over there, just at the corner of my desk, have it on while I'm doing work, which would be writing on pieces of paper back then instead of typing. You know, interspersed with music, interspersed with occasional special bulletins, and they set this up so there is not much of, but I want to say a rising action. Something's going on with Mars. Let's now cut to Professor Carl Phillips, who will tell us about it. And this isn't anything unusual either. They would interview specialists. I mean, it was just like a news program that you would see today, except you couldn't see the people doing the interview. You couldn't see the newscaster. There was just an essential trust of the American people that they were being told right.
Opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Desmond?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips. Although that's the popular conjecture of those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you're quite convinced, as a scientist, that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars?
I'd say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for these gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Phillips, I cannot account for it.
So he says, Mr. Phillips, I cannot account for it, but let's make an inference, take a guess here, in other words. I forgot what the word, okay. What are those gas eruptions supposed to be? What do you think? I think they're the Martians' ships taking off for Earth. I can't see them being anything else. But I'm going to end the video here. I went a little over the 10 minutes I was supposed to, and we will pick this up in a moment.